On the morning of April 16th, 1947, the French cargo ship SS Grandcamp was docked at the port of Texas City, Texas, loaded with 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Around 8 a.m., smoke was discovered in the ship's hold. The crew tried to fight the fire with steam, afraid that water would damage the cargo. At 9:12 a.m., the Grandcamp exploded with a force so powerful it was felt 150 miles away. The blast created a 15-foot tidal wave, launched the ship's 2-ton anchor over a mile inland, and generated a mushroom cloud that could be seen from Galveston. The explosion triggered a chain reaction of fires and explosions that lasted 2 days. When it was over, at least 581 people were dead. Thousands were injured, and the city of Texas City was devastated. This is the story of the Texas City disaster, the deadliest industrial accident in American history, and an explosion so massive, it remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions ever recorded. Texas City sits on the Texas Gulf Coast, about 30 miles southeast of Houston. In 1947, it was a booming industrial city of about 16,000 people. The port was crucial to the American economy, handling petroleum products, chemicals, and agricultural goods. The waterfront was lined with oil refineries, chemical plants, storage facilities, and docks. World War II had just ended 2 years earlier, and American industry was transitioning from war production back to peacetime manufacturing. One of the major needs was fertilizer ammonium nitrate to feed a growing agricultural industry that needed to produce food for a recovering world. Ammonium nitrate is an excellent fertilizer. It's also highly explosive. During the war, it had been used to make bombs. After the war, the same chemical was being manufactured and shipped as fertilizer. Everyone in the industry knew it could be dangerous under certain conditions, but it was considered safe when handled properly. In April 1947, 2 ships were docked at Texas City's port, both loaded with ammonium nitrate. The SS Grandcamp, a French liberty ship carrying 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate. The SS High Flyer, an American ship docked nearby, carrying 1,000 tons of ammonium nitrate and sulfur. Both ships were loading or preparing to load additional cargo. The Grandcamp also carried ammunition, machinery, and other goods. It was scheduled to depart soon for France. The waterfront area was busy with workers longshoremen loading cargo, refinery workers at nearby plants, sailors on the ships, and people in offices and warehouses along the docks. It was a normal workday morning in an industrial port city. Around 8 a.m. on April 16th, smoke was discovered coming from the cargo hold of the SS Grandcamp. The exact cause of the fire has never been definitively determined, but the most likely scenario is that someone had carelessly discarded a cigarette, or there had been some friction or heat source that ignited paper or packing materials in the hold. The crew discovered the smoke and immediately tried to fight the fire, but they made a fatal decision. Instead of using water, they decided to use steam to extinguish the fire. Their reasoning was that water might damage the ammonium nitrate cargo, making it worthless. Steam, they thought, would put out the fire without damaging the goods. This decision was catastrophic. The steam actually accelerated the chemical reaction. Ammonium nitrate, when heated, begins to decompose. As the temperature rises, the decomposition accelerates. The steam made the hold hotter and more humid, creating ideal conditions for a runaway reaction. The crew closed the hatches to contain the steam, which meant sealing the fire inside with the explosive cargo. The temperature inside the hold continued to rise. The ammonium nitrate was now heating rapidly, approaching the temperature at which it would detonate. By around 8:30 a.m., smoke was pouring from the ship's seams. The ship's hull was getting hot to the touch. People on the dock could feel the heat radiating from the vessel. Longshoremen stopped working and moved away from the ship. Some crew members abandoned ship. The Texas City Fire Department was called and arrived quickly. Firefighters set up on the dock and began preparing to fight the fire. But they faced a dilemma should they pour water on a ship full of explosive material. They knew ammonium nitrate could explode, but they also knew that letting the fire burn unchecked was dangerous. A crowd gathered to watch. Spectators came from nearby businesses, homes, and schools. People stood on the dock, on nearby ship, and in buildings overlooking the port. They didn't fully understand the danger. Some took photographs. It was a spectacular sight, smoke in various colors, red, orange, yellow. pouring from the ship, the hull glowing with heat. At approximately 9:12 a.m., the SS Grandcamp exploded. The explosion was cataclysmic. 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate detonated with a force estimated at 2.7. 3.2 kilotons of TNT, equivalent roughly one-fifth the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. The blast was so powerful that it was felt over 150 miles away. Windows shattered in Galveston, 10 miles away. People in Houston, 40 miles away, felt buildings shake. The shockwave knocked people off their feet miles from the explosion. Seismographs at Denver, Colorado, 1,000 miles away, registered the event. The Grandcamp literally disintegrated. The ship was blown into millions of pieces of shrapnel that became deadly projectiles flying in all directions. The 2-ton anchor of the ship was blown over a mile inland and found later embedded in the ground. Parts of the ship were found up to 2 miles away. The explosion created a 15-foot tidal wave that surged over the docks and into the surrounding area. The wave swept away people, cars, and debris, drowning many who had survived the initial blast. A massive fireball erupted, followed by a mushroom cloud that rose thousands of feet into the air. People in Galveston saw the cloud and thought Texas City had been hit by an atomic bomb. The cloud was visible for miles, and the heat from the explosion could be felt blocks away. Everyone on or near the dock was killed instantly. The Texas City Fire Department, nearly every firefighter in the city was wiped out. They had been on the dock prepared to fight the fire when the ship exploded. All 27 members of the fire department died. The longshoremen who had been working on or near the ship were killed. Crew members still on board were killed. Spectators who had gathered to watch were killed. People in nearby offices and warehouses were killed by the blast, by flying debris, or by collapsing buildings. The explosion triggered fires throughout the industrial area. Refineries, chemical plants, and storage tanks ignited. Burning debris rained down across the city, starting fires in residential areas blocks away. The SS Wilson B. Keene, a nearby ship, was picked up by the explosion and hurled into another ship, the SS High Flyer, which was also carrying ammonium nitrate. The High Flyer caught fire. Now there was another ship full of explosive material on fire, and everyone who could have dealt with it, the fire department, was dead. The destruction from the Grandcamp explosion was immense. The dock area was obliterated. The Monsanto chemical company plant, located near the dock, was completely destroyed. All 145 workers in the plant died. Other businesses along the waterfront were demolished. Residential areas near the port suffered severe damage. Homes were destroyed or damaged by the blast wave. Fires spread through neighborhoods. People were buried under rubble, trapped in collapsed buildings, or lying injured in the streets. The explosion knocked out power and communications. Phones were dead. Radios were down. Emergency services were destroyed. The fire department was gone. The police station was damaged. Hospitals were overwhelmed and damaged. Survivors described scenes of apocalyptic destruction. Bodies were everywhere. Debris covered the streets. Fires raged out of control. People wandered in shock, bleeding and burned. The smell of burning chemicals filled the air. The sounds of explosions continued as storage tanks and equipment continued to blow up in the fires. Help began arriving from surrounding communities. Fire departments from Houston, Galveston, and other cities rushed to Texas City. Military personnel from nearby bases responded. Doctors and nurses came from across the region. But they arrived to find a scene of devastation that overwhelmed their resources. And then, at 1:10 a.m. on April 17th, about 16 hours after the Grandcamp exploded, the SS High Flyer exploded. The High Flyer had been on fire all day. Attempts had been made to tow it away from the dock or to sink it in deep water, but the fire was too intense, and the ship was stuck. At 1:10 a.m., the 1,000 tons of ammonium nitrate and sulfur on board detonated. The second explosion was smaller than the first, but still massive. It caused additional destruction in areas that had already been devastated. Buildings that had survived the first explosion were now destroyed. Fires that had been brought under control reignited. Rescue workers who had been searching through rubble had to flee. The two explosions, plus the fires and secondary explosions that continued for days, created a disaster of unprecedented scale. The exact death toll from the Texas City disaster has never been definitively determined. Official estimates range from 581 to 600 dead. But many believe the true number is higher because some victims were completely vaporized or their bodies were never identified. Among the dead, all 27 members of the Texas City Fire Department, all 145 workers at the Monsanto chemical plant, most of the longshoremen working on the docks, crew members from the ships, office workers in nearby buildings, residents of nearby neighborhoods, spectators who had gathered to watch the fire, rescue workers who responded to the first explosion and were killed in the second. Over 3,500 people were injured, many critically. Burns, lacerations from flying glass and debris, crush injuries from collapsed buildings, broken bones and trauma were common. Hospitals across the region were overwhelmed. The physical destruction was staggering. Over 1,000 buildings destroyed or severely damaged. Entire blocks of the city flattened. The port area obliterated. 2 ships completely destroyed, several others heavily damaged. Chemical plants and refineries destroyed or damaged. Homes destroyed for blocks around the port. The economic impact was enormous. Texas City's industrial base was destroyed. Thousands were out of work. The cost of the disaster, in 1947 dollars, was estimated at over $100 million, equivalent to well over $1 billion of today. The investigation into the cause of the disaster began immediately. The key questions were, what started the fire on the Grandcamp? Could the explosion have been prevented? Who was responsible? The findings included the fire. Most likely started by careless smoking or some heat source igniting packing materials. The exact cause could never be proven because all evidence was destroyed in the explosion. The fatal decision. Using steam instead of water to fight the fire was the critical mistake. This created conditions that caused the ammonium nitrate to detonate. If they had flooded the hold with water immediately, the explosion likely could have been prevented. Cargo. Ammonium nitrate was known to be potentially explosive, but regulations about transporting it were inadequate. The fertilizer-grade ammonium nitrate was not properly labeled as hazardous. Ship crews and dock workers didn't fully understand the danger. Warning signs. Ignored. There had been previous incidents with ammonium nitrate fires and explosions, including a major explosion in Oppau, Germany in 1921 that killed 500+ people. But the lessons from these disasters had not been fully learned or implemented in safety regulations. The spectators. Many deaths could have been prevented if people had been evacuated when the fire was first discovered. But no one ordered an evacuation because the danger wasn't fully understood. People were allowed to gather and watch, putting themselves in the blast zone. The second explosion. The high flyer explosion could have been prevented if the ship had been towed away or sunk earlier. But the chaos from the first explosion, the destruction of emergency services, and the intensity of the fire made it impossible to deal with the high flyer in time. Lawsuits were filed by survivors and families of victims against the United States government because the ammonium nitrate was manufactured for a government program, the shipping companies, and others. The legal cases went on for years. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court ruled in asterisk Deadliest versus United States, asterisk 1953, that the government could not be held liable because the decisions made were discretionary functions protected by sovereign immunity. This was controversial and remains one of the most criticized Supreme Court decisions in American law. Victims and families received some compensation through relief funds and settlements, but many felt justice was never truly served. The Texas City disaster led to major changes in how hazardous materials are handled, transported, and stored. Regulations for ammonium nitrate. Stricter standards for manufacturing, storing, and transporting ammonium nitrate. Better labeling and hazard warnings. Regulations about mixing ammonium nitrate with other materials. Requirements for fire prevention and suppression systems. Port and dock safety. Improved safety protocols for loading and unloading hazardous materials. Better training for dock workers and ship crews. Requirements for emergency evacuation plans. Restrictions on spectators near hazardous operations. Industrial safety. Greater oversight of chemical plants and refineries. Improved emergency response planning. Better coordination between industries and local emergency services. Lessons about the dangers of cascading industrial disasters. Firefighting. Training for firefighters about hazardous materials. Protocols for fighting fires involving explosive materials. Hint, evacuate and let it burn from a distance. Don't try to put it out. Recognition that some fires are too dangerous to fight directly. The disaster also highlighted the need for federal disaster relief. The destruction was so extensive that local and state resources were insufficient. This tragedy helped lead to the creation of modern federal disaster response systems. Texas City rebuilt slowly. The port was eventually restored. Chemical plants and refineries were rebuilt with better safety measures. The population recovered and grew. Today, Texas City is again a thriving industrial city, though the memory of April 16, 1947, has never faded. A memorial park was built on the site of the disaster. It includes a cemetery for unidentified victims, monuments to the firefighters and other victims, and a museum documenting the disaster. The propeller from the SS Grandcamp recovered from the wreckage stands as a monument. Every April 16th, a memorial service is held to remember those who died, survivors, the few still living, and families of victims gather to ensure the disaster is never forgotten. The Texas City disaster stands as a reminder of several critical lessons. Industrial accidents can be catastrophic. When dealing with explosive or hazardous materials, a small mistake can become a massive disaster. Proper training matters. The crew of the Grandcamp made a fatal decision because they didn't fully understand the properties of their cargo. Better training might have saved 600 lives. Regulations are written in blood. The safety regulations that now govern hazardous materials transport exist because of disasters like Texas City. Cascading failures magnify disasters. The Grandcamp explosion destroyed emergency services, making it impossible to deal with the high flyer, which then exploded, causing more destruction. Never underestimate the danger. The spectators who gathered to watch the fire on the Grandcamp didn't realize they were standing next to a bomb. Curiosity killed hundreds. On April 16, 1947, at 9:12 a.m., an explosion in Texas City, Texas, killed at least 581 people and injured 3,500 more. It destroyed a significant portion of an American city and remains the deadliest industrial accident in U.S. history. The explosion was preventable if the fire had been fought with water instead of steam, if proper warnings had been given, if spectators had been evacuated, if the danger had been fully understood and respected. But they didn't know. They made their best guesses. They tried to save the cargo. They gathered to watch something spectacular. And they paid the ultimate price. The victims of the Texas City disaster were workers, firefighters, spectators, and residents who were just going about their normal day on April 16th, 1947. They didn't know that morning that Texas City was sitting on top of a bomb. They didn't know that a decision to use steam instead of water would trigger one of the largest explosions in human history. Their deaths changed industrial safety in America. The regulations that keep workers and communities safe today exist because 581 people died in Texas City. Rest in peace to the victims of the Texas City disaster. Your tragedy taught the world that some materials demand ultimate respect, that some decisions can't be undone, and that the price of industrial progress can sometimes be measured in lives. The SS Grandcamp exploded on April the 16th, 1947, at 9:12 a.m. The SS High Flyer exploded 16 hours later. The fires burned for days. The city was devastated, but Texas City rebuilt. The port reopened. Industry returned. Life went on. The memorial stands. The propeller remains. And every April 16th, we remember the day an American city learned about the terrible power of ammonium nitrate.